discuss and exchange the experiences. So we will continue this discussion. In the meantime, we have our guest in the Zoom room right now. She is Professor Letizia Bindi. If
Hello, everybody.
if I'm not misspelling her name.
Yeah, Letizia Bindi. Sì, is correct. Is correct. Thank you.
So she comes from Italy. She's a senior professor, and she has a wonderful work on transhumance and pastoralism. Her book is very popular. You can see her complete profile on this unit of our lesson, right? So she is with us, and we welcome her to the forum, and we invite her to her wonderful exchange of the knowledge today. And thank you, madam. You have joined even after the emergency had happened with you today.
Yeah. But by the way, I was correct with the hours at the end, but I wasn't in the incorrect link. So finally, my problem was major a problem of link to the meeting than a problem of hours. By the way, we get it. So
Okay.
now
Yeah,
we are
yeah. So,
fit
so,
for
so it is. So you, the forum is to you now. You please take over, and if you want to share something, then you can do.
Yeah, for
Thank you.
sure. I'm going to share my PowerPoint presentation. Hope this is okay. Are you able to see? Are you seeing?
Yeah, is there?
Okay. I'm trying also the presentation mode, trying to see if this move. Can you see moving the
Yes,
slides?
yes. It's
Perfect.
perfect.
So
Yes.
we can start. So many thanks for this invitation. It has been a real honor and pleasure to be and to join your course and your activities. I think is extremely important. Moreover, because it is in the framework of the International Year for Rangelands and Pastoralism. I was part of this support group since the beginning, with many of the people that I see among the participants today. And I'm really honored to continue in these years to share with many people about this path that we are doing towards the celebration of this important International Year of the United Nations, because I think that pastoralism and rangelands are not only a crucial topic to observe and study and supporting in terms of respect for environmental issues, but above all is a sort of mirror of the more critical topic that we are facing in the framework of Anthropocene or of the crisis of climate change. So it's sort of a revelator, an element of for revealing all the frictions that we are facing in these decades. So I think it's extremely important to deal with such a kind of element. And at the same time, because I work since many years with shepherds and herders in Italy, in other European countries, and also in Latin America, where I have a research since 2019 with the communities of Mapuche people in the Patagonian, central Patagonian area. So trying to do even a comparison, a comparison between the crisis of pastoralism in European countries and other major crises that we are facing in other continents, like, for example, the South American one. So by the way, speaking about all these crises, I try to have a sort of positive approach to manage such kind of crisis. And I propose to you this lecture about guardians of the future, shepherd and herders and the frictions of the Anthropocene, because I think that this contribution has to discuss the fundamental elements of extensive grazing, the value of biocultural heritage, such pastoralism and extensive animal farming is, that protects and values the knowledge, the practices, the landscapes, and the territories of each country that we are dealing with. After the critical analysis of the main environmental, social, and cultural aspects and impacts of the different forms of livestock farming, I'll try then to address some reflection about the plains and the mountain relationship, the coexistence between man and animals, grazing as an ecosystem service, the environmental, economic, and social sustainability of the activity, conservation of the past, and prospects for the future. The case studies that I'll be speaking about are essentially collected from European pastoralism, and in particular from extensive livestock farming in Italy. As I said before, I work a lot on central southern Italian area, Apennines, so the backbone of the country. But as I said, even in other European countries, such as, for example, France and Spain, and I've been working in Argentina, Argentinian Patagonia, and Chilean Patagonian too. My research methodology with pastoral communities is essentially a qualitative research based on in-depth interviews, focus group, participatory inventories of shared heritage, and different form of dissemination. The value of the data and witnesses that I collected, shared with communities and local actors, is today constituted as an intangible cultural heritage rooted in the territories. This heritage has been recognized first with the inscription of transhumance to the UNESCO Intangible Heritage List, first time in 2019, second time in 2023, but I'm going to speak about this a bit onward, and now with the recognition projects in the FAO GIAS, so Global Agrarian Heritage Register. In this sense, the central question I'd like to address during this...
Professor, sorry to intervene. Your slide is not moving.
No, I'm not moving them.
Okay, sorry.
I'm going to move in a
Sorry.
very brief moment.
Okay, thank you.
How extensive and traditional pastoralism will be preserved and developed in the future, and the frictions that local herders and shepherd communities are experiencing in such a kind of safeguarding process. So my main questions are: who decides on the value of the shared knowledge and practices for the communities, who leads and coordinates the processes and determines the dominant narratives and policies about pastoralism, and which kind of environmental implications are deriving from the transformation in animal farming productions and climate change crisis. Extensive grazing of different animal species and breed traditionally associates quality productions, biocultural heritage, contributing to the maintenance of biodiversity, the landscape and ecosystem services, while reducing land consumption and hydrogeological risks. In inner regions, the mountains and the highlands, the shepherds and his systems of knowledge and practices become guardians of fragile territories, attacked by growing phenomena of socio-cultural deconstruction and abandonment. In addition, pastoralism offers a sustainable and autonomous form of work and income helping to keep mountain areas, often marked by severe depopulation and impoverishment, alive and productive. Transhumance and extensive pastoralism, which is not essentially and only transhumance, but by the way, forms of movement between the plain and the mountain and so on, is a particular form of breeding and systems of knowledge practice based essentially on seasonal droving of livestock along migratory routes, for example, in the Mediterranean, on the Alps, in search of pasture, from the mountains to the plain, from the inner areas to the coast and back. This particular way of raising simultaneously defines a mode of land use and a way to know and to define spaces and landscapes in many parts of the world, as we very well know. So European and non-European, my book that you quoted just before, the grazing communities is centered and focused on European cases, but there are huge literature about other kind of and other continents transhumance, and involves many different animal species: sheep, cows, horses, reindeers, and camelids, and so on. It is a practice that provides not only food and other products derived from animals, but also a series of ecosystem services and common goods, a profound maintenance of local spaces, a regeneration of biodiversity of the territory and the animal lines bred, the persistence of specific form of social organization and management of environmental resources that today are usually pointed out as an alternative to the unsustainability of industrial agricultural systems. In many European regions, researchers have documented the presence of transhumance populations since the Roman times, and recently sheep, cattle, and other types of farming have been transformed or influenced by processes of modernization, mechanization, and intensive milk, meat, and wool production. This has generated uncertainty, discontinuity, and change in practices, a different form of knowledge transfer, and a great socioeconomic transformation. However, in many European countries, extensive grazing still exists as an efficient form of agriculture that profoundly shapes the landscape, preserves biodiversity, protects vernacular architecture, and traditional social structure. Added to this set of knowledge, practices is a crucial sense of interspecies coexistences, which transforms traditional pastoral activity into a precious opportunity to reconsider the relationship between culture and nature, and man, animal, and interspecies animal relationships. Although the products of extensive grazing are increasingly appreciated for their quality, respect for the environment, the landscape, and animal welfare, for environmental and economic sustainability, the sector is currently exposed in many cases to a serious demographic loss, registering a notorious reduction of companies and little generational change. For this reason, it is increasingly necessary to support the sector, helping headers and in technological innovation processes, in the organization and optimization of production processes, in social innovation, and in generation of new economies, as well as the adequate management of ecosystems safeguarding cultural identity. This contribution, this conference somehow will explore the efficacy of a multidisciplinary paradigm to analyze rangelands and pastoralism governmentality, articulating personal and communitarian issues and crossing anthropological and economic insights as an opportunity for observing local and global processes and frictions in the production, distribution, and consumption of agri-food products in the main framework of political ecology criticism. The multidisciplinary interweaving that animated, especially in the last decade, the critical reflection on the human nature entanglements led to reconsider the very notion of development and risk in the framework of a new political ecology. This implied a considerable reduction of trust in the Sustainable Development Goals, and more generally of the overall global rhetoric of sustainability, ending up considering if it is a new global and dominant narrative aimed at mitigating and reassuring the global Anthropocene regime without actually producing that change and reversal of priorities that it would be essential and unpostponable according to the critical theories of Capitalocene hyper-extractivist neoliberalistic that associate Sustainable Development Goals establishment, dissemination, and education as a new discourse on global norms, especially throughout the use and misuse of narrations. The intertwining of socio-anthropological knowledge and the economic consideration applied to Sustainable Development Goals especially emerges from the fieldwork and actor network analysis. Basing on these theoretical approaches and critical methodologies, the concrete articulation between environmental protection on one hand and reduction of waste and collective soil and other primary resources consumption should be considered. A special attention to more or less sustainable individual behaviors has been analogously deserved by the wider interdisciplinary range of sustainability science, aiming to critically define the point of interconnection between global transitions and dynamics of transformation and the resilience of local groups of citizens with their diversified and changing attitudes. Contemporary extensive grazing spaces appear in a way as friction areas. On one hand, in fact, modern intensive agro-industry and the trend towards extractivist agri-food production have led to the growing abandonment or improper use of pastures. On the other hand, they have radically transformed production conditions and human-animal interactions, typical of extensive grazing, the moral economies of agriculture according to tradition and in harmony with the surrounding and landscapes. Therefore, it is increasingly appropriate to make the younger generations and people living far from rural areas aware of the usefulness and value and extensive traditional grazing, create a new professional awareness, open new opportunities in the agri-food sector, but also to improve grazing as a way to preserve and protect the local landscape. At the same time, a new look at pastoralism implies a reflection on growing multifunctionality of animal farming, but also on the protection and shared management of civic and community uses, on the recovery of walls, for example, supplies, rest areas, and buildings for herds, the stazi in Italian language, along the pastoral routes that are at their turn archaeological and artistic and heritage valuable goods. Extensive pastoralism is presented as a multidisciplinary and multiscalar field of research between local, national, and international issues, a field positioned between past and present critical issues, which unfold through processes of fragmentation and recollection in an area of uncomfortable commitment for ecological activism, for the enhancement of cultural heritage, and tourism promotion in the contemporary conflict scenarios. Italy is one of the 10 European countries, along with Austria and Greece, since 2019, and from 2023 with Albania, Andorra, Croatia, France, Luxembourg, Romania, and Spain, for which transhumance has been recognized as a cultural asset on the UNESCO list for intangible heritage. This inclusion in the UNESCO ICH list today has a significant impact on grazing, now framed as an UNESCO asset, transforming it into a commodity, a tourist consumer good, a commercial brand, a folkloric practice sometimes distorted by market rules and quality European certification and the common agricultural policy. These critical considerations are to be inserted in a more holistic approach to environmental sustainability, food production, and sustainable development goals, deeply entangled with a multidisciplinary criticism on rural development, social innovation in agriculture, respect for the environment vis-à-vis the demands of an increasingly growing population. A constellation of individual behaviors, socio-cultural orientation of movements, such as environmentalists, animal rights activists, sovereigntists, deniers, revisionists of environmental problems, offer a range of possible, very differentiated responses to the crucial issues of global sustainability, the so-called One Health theory, and the quality of life approach. From a social anthropological point of view, researchers since the middle of the 20th century concentrated their attention on different forms and strategies of adaptation of groups and individuals to the emergencies posed by climate change, by the intrinsic contradictory and anti-economic nature, in many cases, of certain type of production. In the first phase of the concerned debate, rural economy and sustainability science supported social sciences oriented almost exclusively towards the analysis of the threats of climate change, pollution, a drastic reduction of available resources, risks for safety and subsistence of the people, insisting on special regions. Only later it emerged a more reticular notion of threat associating environmental risks to social and cultural ones, such as the growing depopulation of certain regions, the consequent loss in terms of environmental stewardship, the deconstruction of traditional social networks, and their impact on rural practices, opinions about nature conservation, and food habits, leading to the present natural resources and food hyper-consumerism and irresponsibility. Alongside this, the study of environmental and social transformation essentially advanced through ethnography, comparatively analyzing the connection of environmental crisis to technological and industrial development and to increasingly mechanized food production, distanced from communities and people intertwined with forms of gastropower. Nonetheless, the analysis of global food and agro-industry was combined with the minute practices of conditioning the bodies and lives of single human and non-human animals, and the so-called biopower of food provision. A holistic and multi-scale understanding of sustainability necessarily implies a reconsideration of the multi-species responsibility, as Donna Haraway has called it, an experimental approach to social and interspecies more than human justice of radical ecology of practices in agriculture and animal farming, addressing the question of access to the land and the control and circulation of food, as well as of its symbolic and commercial valorization. Today, we would define the critical positioning of individuals and groups vis-à-vis the crucial topic of food provisioning as a food citizenship. And we are deeply convinced that working on extensive pastoralism is a way to endorse and supporting this kind of responsibility in food and food citizenship. At the same time, animal welfare, ethical food concerns, and the claim for the full acknowledgement of subjectivity of living and sentient beings disclosed the new possibility of interspecies co-being. Against the imbalances of extractivism in post-capitalist economies, of the monoculture of the mind, as Vandana Shiva has called them, which are at the very origin of an unsustainable and unhealthy global food provision. Another powerful contribution to the critique of the global resources management and food systems has been developed by the peasant and indigenous rights movements in Latin America, outlined and discussed in the Escobar's notion of post-desarrollo, post-development, and the ecopolitical pluriverse, as well as in the European and North American critical concept of anti-fragility, as a reaction of systems to stresses and threats, which is not resilient nor oppositive, but a plastic, more than adaptive and innovative way to deal with difficulties, dispossession, violence, and all the attitudes radically characterizing the Anthropocene. Socio-cultural and economic regeneration is then deeply rooted in this capacity of communities and citizens to deal with changes and transformation, adopting a truly participatory posture in a new opening of the moral economies of a change towards a new sense of circularity and commoning. In Europe, the debate on form of synergy between natural and cultural heritage focuses above all on the conservation of habitats and landscape. Research in this area has highlighted pastoralism as a biocultural practice. At the meeting of traditional knowledge and values, landscapes, and biodiversity, and as a customary code connected to a form of resilience. In European and Mediterranean regions, historically characterized by extensive grazing, this practice has profoundly influenced social structures and ways of life, kinship relationship, symbolic representations and settlements, and so on. Today, a certain territorial promotion done in a hurry, from above and without much attention to the elements of biocultural roots settled in the territories, runs the risk of dismantling and weakening this set of local knowledge and practices. Starting from the critical framework and from an ongoing idea of environmental responsibility and citizenship, I try to explore some main issues. The first one is about awareness and responsibility. Animal farming derived products awareness and responsible consumption as an individual ability and as a sign of the political agency of communities at the local level, which is partially addressed through, with limits outlined above. To contribute to the maintenance and the enhancement of local pastoral systems and as a contribution of a more sustainable way to manage soils and food resources in the present. The second element is about local knowledge safeguard and sustainable food heritage valorization as a contemporary form of safeguarding and enhancing a correct set of soil usages, promoting territories and leveraging local animal farming without destroying their traditional practices and land other resources sharing, and without dismissing their social and economic productive balance. Third, social and individual impact in green transition, led and implemented by rural development policies, tendentially or at least officially designed and directed to the needs of and urgencies of communities. I think, for example, for Europe, to leader programs or the local action groups activities, the inner areas strategies in Italy, or other strategies and policies oriented to support disadvantaged regions, and their concrete implications in the conservation and relaunching of traditional pastoral systems. Sustainability in the last decades became a sort of epistemic infrastructure of fluid concepts and contested terrains, but it's instead powerfully connected to the more radical claim to responsible consumption, food emancipation of subaltern and low-income subjects, as well as attention to quality, fairness, traceability of food, keep to be supported as an expression of individual agency, but also of public engagement against conflicts and frictions between agriculture, distribution and control of access to food, and as a matter of peace, justice, and strong institution. So taking care of grasslands and extensive pastoralist societies increasingly correspond to deal with agri-food power, which is increasingly extractive and technocratic, a sort of micropolitics of biopower based on a capillary management of production and symbolic as well as concrete representations on animal farming derived products. At the same time, it means also to become aware of the institutional control of the food supply infrastructures, as well as of distinctive role of local and typical foods in contemporary society. Doing research on extensive pastoralism necessarily implies a radically multidisciplinary approach, as I said just before. The contribution of social sciences, landscape reclamation and planning, rural economics, and environmental studies to the regeneration and sustainable development of inner lands spaces as systemic margins in which people can experience belonging to places and new fundamental form of economies. The attention that for a long time has been reserved for sheep trades, transhumance routes, and traditional grazing practices has not prevented, however, the abandonment and progressive deconstruction and obsolescence of the old mobility infrastructures that for centuries have represented, at least in Europe, but not only in Europe, the backbone of our mountainous and remote rural spaces in its living and close relationship with the plain and the coasts. Extensive livestock farming is considered to combine high-quality food production and local territorial resilience and development against the dramatic decline in terms of human and animal population of soil, conservation, and environmental health, becoming a de facto garrison against abandonment and the loss of biodiversity, as well as sustainability in terms of food and soil for local people. The major loss in animal production is presently the grass-based systems, while industrial and intensive animal farming is not experiencing any crisis, according at least to the European Feeding Strategy 2023. Implying a considerable loss of pastures and rangelands in the last 40 years, around the 30%, and a contemporary degradation and biodiversity loss of the others due to climate change and growth. At the same time, depopulation and demographic agency is implying a loss of workforce and cross-generational problems, and renewal, as well as the traditional transmission of local knowledge and practices connected with the breed selection, right feeding systems, local routes crossing, and pathways. In many cases, hard work of grazing is presently entrusted by native shepherds to migrants who are not always expert in such a practice. These migrant people are often kept in very harsh living conditions because the sons or daughters and the grandchildren of local animal farmers no longer accept certain lifestyle and sacrifices associated with life in the mountains pastures or in semi-nomad grazing regimes. Considering for a while the geographical and territorial support for pastoral activities, we can appreciate also that trattori, the transhuman routes, the sheep track, represent a large portion of rural territories, ritually and culturally mapped, archaeologically relevant, and that they encompass as well significant portion of the rural environment, defining themselves also as a commercial asset subject to disputes over consumption and returns, in many cases within the limits and the legal use of these environmental assets, has been pointed out in recent years by those who have dedicated themselves specifically to observation of the more or less correct and official system of pasture quotas in, for example, in the European agriculture policy, by the group and the association that in various places are in recent years experimenting with the shared management of civic and community uses. I try to explain a bit more about this because it's an interesting point for European context, at least. In Europe, there are quotas that are paid by European policy on agriculture for extensive animal farming, recognizing that shepherds and herders with their activity are developing an activity that is supporting the maintenance of soil. Okay, so this is corresponding to a quota that is paid to the people that are doing grazing, they are doing animal farming in the territories. What happens that some great and powerful companies are ensuring that they are putting the animals in this area. Effectively, they don't put animals in these mountains. They are paid with the European policy quotas, and so they receive a lot of money by this, but effectively, pastoral activities are not developed. This is called in Italy, for example, mafia dei pascoli, rangeland mafia, or paper rangeland, because finally it's simply fictitious. So it's quite interesting because it's a utilitaristic use of agricultural and pastoral quotas, which is not corresponding to a real care of the rangelands. And this is a great problem because it's fueling the problem of abandonment of the mountain and of reduction of the rangelands. Unlike what has already happened for some time in France and Spain, trade associations in Italy have been slow to structure and develop. And only in recent years, we have associations and structures being established that recognize grazing as the center of their activities of safeguarding and improvement, but also of promotion, support, information towards the operator of the sector. Among these associations, for example, Alpine Pastoral Association, Assonapa, Ruralpini, and so on, there is Rete Appia, Appia Networks for Pastoralism Italy, a pastoral network that deliberately brings together operators in the sector, so practitioners, ranchers, nomadic herders, scholars, activists, which with the aim of supporting and raise awareness of pastoralism issues to support breeders and herders with regard to various practical regulatory and environmental issues, for example, pasture management, the controversial relationship with the larger predators, grazing regulation, production and processing of milk and meat, the delicate issues of wool and related crafts, the growing tourist interest in the practices of herders, eco-museums focused on areas and practices of grazing and farming. In this sense, Appia Network is conceived as an associative subject aiming to recover the role and farming of mediator of needs, urgencies, and requests in the contemporary complexity of the common agricultural policy, the protocols, the national and European regulations of agri-food products, and the framework for sustainable rural development projects. A very interesting issue to be considered is also the one of natural parks, Nature 2000 sites, man and biosphere, reserves, and other protected habitats and areas are contributing or threatening the persistence of traditional farming system and practices, not only because of the reproduction, sometimes a bit out of control, of large predators as animal deserving a special protection that ends up with an increasing risk of attacks against animal livestock managed by shepherds and herders. These attacks, in fact, are not only physically threatening the grazed animals, but also implying stress and fear in the mothers, for example, causing the loss of milk, or in some case of fetus they are engendering. At the same time, their presence in asking for many different protection practices, sometimes efficient, other time inefficient, such as fencing, especially selected of dressed dogs, different prevention behaviors and patterns, such as movement, ways of moving and organizing the herds and sheep groups, and so on, asking to the animal farmers a considerably greater amount of work during the days. At the same time, a great problem is represented by virus and various infections that are affecting animals, which are spread due to the global circulation of farmed animals. I mean, for example, brucellosis, swine fever, other kinds of zoonosis fueled by the fear of new opportunities for spillover phenomena, such in the case of SARS and COVID-19 contagion. Faced to such a kind of problems, money compensations are absolutely insufficient to manage the unsafety and uncertainty, and they represent today one of the major critical elements in the management of livestock farming, both in extensive and, of course, majorly in intensive or semi-intensive farming systems. Even new food marketing trends, such as, for example, high quality and niche food products demanded by Western rich markets, are not accepting the increasing cost of extensive animal products, and they are only partially oriented to accept the certification labeling protocols, which are necessarily implying an increase of cost and time needed to produce such a high-quality meat and milk food chain. Despite several unofficial declarations about the value of extensive livestock farming as potentially more sustainable and ensuring better food products, European protocol and the common agricultural policy are not totally engaging in a political and economic support to remote and mountainous animal farming companies and systems, nor in a real protection of safeguard for local territories addressed and fit for such a kind of production, implying an increasing fragilization of those regions and groups engaged in this kind of practices. Moreover, national and international policies seem to take in a very scarce account the added value of extensive animal farming that is considerably reducing the need for plantations and animal food pellets, contributing even through this to the carbon emissions and soils consumed and also the contribution of such an activity against the complete dismission and abandon of inner, mountainous, and marginal herding and grazing territories. In this sense, dealing with the resilience and regeneration of extensive pastoral systems is somehow managing and working for a new strategic vision of rural areas and for a revitalization of rural value chains connected with animal traditional and transhuman farming. Unlike what has already happened in France and Spain, as we said, local and national herders and shepherd association in Italy advanced slowly, and only in recent years they were established recognizing grassland and extensive pastoralism as the center of their activities of safeguarding and improvement. Such schools also promoted and supported and informed the various operators of the sector. Among these associations that I said before, Appia has supported even the activation of the first example of national school of pastoralism. In France and Spain, reserved areas and transhuman houses are constituted as a source of documentation on grazing, but also on the conservation and improvement of cultivated biodiversity. For example, reproduction and protection of sheep, goat, and bovine lines in decline, and the custody of pastures and transhumance road. In Italy, there is an eco-museum experience specifically dedicated to this in Ponte Bernardo, but we are going to see a bit better this case, which focuses on extended grazing between the Stura Valley and the Coplain in the Maison de la Transhumance area of competence. Likewise, in the central southern area, the Apennines, path and territorial interpretation centers are being developed, such an eco-museum of the itinerari frentani is called in Italian, so it's a traditional route of pastoralism, which for a few years have recomposed the layout of the path and their stories through a system of pathways shared and in-depth animated by a group of cultists of memory and local stories. Analogously, in France and Spain, sheep breeding schools are active since a decade, more or less, to prepare new generation of shepherds and breeders, enabling them to develop their activity in harmony with the environment of the animals. We assist effectively today to a certain tendency to recover grazing among young people, and the schools of pastoralism are then designed to provide practical and prospective information, regulatory frameworks, innovation tools, awareness of the heritage value and of the tourist potential of agriculture, of pastoral activities. Also in Italy, for about the last years, the training offer of the National School of Pastoralism, the one that we see in the, not that one is the SNAP, National School of Pastoralism, Scuola Nazionale di Pastorizia, has been elaborating, which is inspired by the aforementioned European experiences, providing practical information and in-depth reflections, cultural requests, and perspective of developing. The National School of Pastoralism training offer managed jointly with the Appia Network, the Research Institute of the Ministry of Agriculture, some associations, some universities, and some cultural foundations, will be divided into different modules and is responding to different objectives and actors in the areas. At the same time, in recent months, in the last 2 years, a similar experiment is being launched in Sardinia with a school of pastoralism in this island, specifically linked to the great presence of pastoralism in this region, which is, however, a national realization and financed by a local action group in the framework of LEADER program. And at the same time, there is a school in which is called the school, Tuscan School, the Casentino School of Pastoralism, which is supported by European funds based on the area of Casentino, with a series of associations in university that insist on transhuman and extensive pastoralism and their multi-level and integrated functions and sustainable food, other material, ecosystem services, social and cultural heritage safeguard and valorization, animal and environment respect and conservation, social innovation, and multifunctionality in animal farming. All these experiences are quite interesting to us because I've been part of all these schools, and I'm still part of all these schools, as interesting because we are looking even the audience that the school are encountering. There are not only people that come from the tradition of pastoral families. For example, there are many newcomers, new profiles of people that are approaching pastoral interests in terms of return to the mountain, to coming back to agricultural activities with another kind of awareness, as an engagement, a sort of political choice, a commitment, a deep commitment in contributing to the safeguard of environment, of a good level of life and welfare of animals and people, and to support the roadmap to a more ethical food. In Italy, there are other interesting forms of safeguarding and valorization of extensive grazing practices and knowledge, such as some eco-museums, as I said before, specifically dedicated to extensive pastoral systems. One of the more ancient and more interesting one, is in Ponte Bernardo, in the Cuneo area of Piedmont, and it focuses on extensive grazing between the Stura Valley and the Crow Plain, the Maison de la Transhumance in France. Likewise, in the central area of Apennines, as I said, there is the Ecomuseo Itinerari Frentani. Why they are so important? Because they are coupling and treating together both the cultural issues connected with the recollection of memories, the engagement on tourist destination building, sustainable and attentive to local population. And at the same time, they recuperate, as you see in this slide, the local animal breeds typical of the region. So they are doing a precise intervention in selection of animal breeding and in the maintenance of biodiversity of these territories. In this case, we are assisting, for example, for the Ecomuseum of pastoralism of Ponte Bernardo, to the resumption of production of the particular kind of sheep, which is the Sambucana sheep, and some of the derived products in accordance with traditional and sustainable production styles. For example, cheese, meat, various meat products, handicraft related to wool, and typical objects of pastoralist communities. At the same time, there are activities that are to do with awareness and research, socialization, and dissemination of local history and traditional culture, such as proposal for the tourist routes, educational workshops in school, entertainment activities for the local population, scientific magazines, brochures, and illustrated guides. Other elements that have been developed by the Ecomuseum are incentives, support, and productive interaction system with craft activities related to the territory, such as small local businesses, cultivation of aromatic and medicinal pharmacological herbs, soap factories, and so on, a dairy production laboratory, a sheep meat processing laboratory, a spreaded hotel, as said, an hotel realized in several local houses, for receiving people in an immersive experience in the local pastoral society. A tourist proposal of trails and visit to characteristic places in the area based on the idea of territorial knowledge developed by the heritage community, active protagonists of the eco-museum. The idea of the eco-museum as in substance is essentially to make the local citizenship really protagonists of their own revitalization and regeneration process. When visiting or reading the tourist brochure of the Stura Valley, one can clearly perceive the influence of the eco-museum and the concrete participation of local population to territorial regeneration and the productive activities present in the area. Among the public and private institutional and community associative and informal actors that have contributed to the realization of the eco-museum and the many activities that have been developed by in the framework of the eco-museum, we have not only the association that lead the eco-museum as well, but also the municipality of the Pietraporzio, the consortium of the Escaroon. Escaroon in the local dialect means the sheep that separates from the flock to go looking for the best quality of grass. So the most, how can I say, intelligent sheep, the most acute sheep clever in the sheep, and reactivation of productive activities. And so in the consortium is taken this name, indicating the different part of the flock that separate from the rest, since it is better than others. The mountain community of the Stura Valley, the Piedmont region, so the entire region, which consider and support financially the Eco-Museum, the University of Turin, the Department of Agrarian Studies, a Master in Alpine Cultures, so a system of expertise somehow, and all the relations with other structures and subjects promoting revitalization activities of the traditional pasture and transhumance as the Maison de la Transhumance in La Crau are, for example, the geographical corresponding French side of the ruto, the traditional pastoral route of transhumance of the shepherd between the two regions, and also an agricultural technical school that is locally based, and local association of culture, tourist valorization in the territories, such as, for example, musical groups, connoisseurs of the territory, walkers, artists, and so on. Why it is so important to reconstruct all this multiplicity of subject? Because it means how much and how long to valorize and to support a new concept, a new valorization, even a new reputation for pastoral activities need a great effort by many, many different actors, social and political and economic actors in a territory, oriented to intercept and encountering urban consumers that are increasingly interested in natural milk, meat, wool products, committed with animal welfare and environmental safeguard through extensive farming practices or on local carbon emissions from extensive breeding, ethical concern toward local cultural communities, respect and enhancement. And at the same time, the same audience, same urban audience, is extremely interested actually in the living in an immersive way the time and the days of the herding communities. So it's not only a matter of an experience, as I said, an experience, a tourist experience in a few minutes of visits, but some like to be immersed in the life of herding communities, which is one of the heritage emotions, as Faber has called them, that urban people are requesting increasingly in this time, even with some risk, because we know very well that, for example, people that are not expert, that visit mountainous and pastoral areas, sometimes meet and are at the very center of some critical moment, because they don't know how to deal with animals, how to move in the territories, and so on. So we need even to be prepared to such a kind of different styles of life encounter and meeting. At the same time, in the Italian region of Molise, where I've been working quite a lot in the last years, transhuman tracks are recognizable even if dramatically damaged by infrastructure, despite the prohibition to build or cultivate since 1939. Let's think this. But only very few of these rules that was negating and avoiding the transformation of the usages of the ship track have been observed, and actually the routes in this region are extremely ruined, and only few families still practice the transhumance. It is the case, for example, of a great family of bovine herders, the Colantuono of Frosolone, a family of traditional herders that continue to come from the mountain of the Molise to the plain of Puglia with their cattle every year. And this has been the occasion of a great process of revalorization, even all the process of the nomination to the UNESCO intangible cultural heritage list are spreading out from exactly this family and this phenomenon. So why it is so important to recuperate such a kind of roots? Because it is a witnessing and a way to point out the radical value of the roots as an element that we need to conserve and safeguard in order to enhance and regenerate, in some cases, the activity of extensive pastoralism. In this moment, for example, in Italy, there is also another great process, which is the recuperation of this root infrastructure throughout a great amount of money given by the plan of recovery and resilience derived from the COVID phase. And we are trying to manage such a kind of great economic effort, not only in terms of territorial planification action, but also to support the families. Because what is often not understood by the policy makers is that if we conserve the structures, if we safeguard and recuperate the territories of transhumance and pastoralism, but we don't support really the families that are doing such a kind of activity, we are risking to have a sort of how can I say, a cemetery, a grave of pastoral activities, sort of memorial, but not active at all, not really in action, not really powerfully able to, how can I say, conserving communities in life and in place where they have always lived. I'll try to shorten a bit. In this sense, in addition, some experience of revitalization of the extensive grazing sector have been disseminated, in particular fragile areas, such as, for example, in the Apennine regions marked by the earthquakes before in 2009 and more recently in 2016. Some communities in the very central area of Italy, Lazio, Abruzzo, Marche, Umbria, regions thought that pastoralism and what was connected to it could represent a driving force for territorial regeneration. In this way, groups and collectives have been developed to safeguard and stimulate activities related to livestock, to cheese making according to traditional techniques, resuming the production of native sheep wool and with natural dyes and series of proposed paths. I've been studying this area. It's quite interesting because we have appreciated how much and how long pastoralism can represent really a sort of leverage for the regeneration process in such critical areas as the post-disaster areas. So they ask for our intervention, as a center of research specialized in pastoral topics and pastoral research, because they were convinced and sure that basing on such a kind of traditional activity, they can restore, they can recover a community that were completely destroyed and dismantled by the trauma of the earthquake. And I consider this extremely significant because we can appreciate in such a kind of activities how much and how long pastoralism is not only a matter of production, but it's something that is so hardly and so profoundly connected with identity and community that is somehow a possible leverage for processes that go much more outward, much more ahead in relationship to the regeneration of a community. In an even broader level of improvement and an awareness in recent years, FAO has decided to open, for example, a hub entirely dedicated to listening and interacting with associations and subjects involved in the protection, defense, and support of shepherds in different areas of the planet. The FAO Pastoralist Knowledge Hub, as we well know, as well as the international board that is globally trying to structure and to give substance to a cohesive and sustainable network of cooperation and pressure to the International Year for Rangelands and Pastoralism 2026 in the safeguarding and protection of rangelands and pastoralism, not only as a theme and a topic of celebration, but as a real element of connection and support for the local community of shepherds and herders. Extensive pastoralism is then presented as a research field of extraordinary richness and vitality, and therefore its study requires the contribution of many disciplines that are enabling relating different spatial and temporal dimensions, as well as a plurality of training areas. Considering the patrimonial nature, the heritage nature of these systems of rural practices and knowledge means working together with the communities so that they do not lose their identity and their own history. The biocultural heritage of extensive grazing is a sort of territorial capital, a result of centuries old processes of formation and sedimentation of traditional community practices, especially in the Apennine community, where I've been working a bit. The past of the centers affected by the earthquake, traditions, and local knowledge were the starting point to discuss new experiences of entrepreneurship and sustainable development, anchored in the ancient roots and knowledge experience present in the territory, but not yet sufficiently known and valued. The reflection and commitment of the researchers has been oriented in the case to re-articulate the relationship between plains and mountains, as I said, between the coast and inner countries. The central idea is to increase the participation of students and teachers who participate in the processes of revitalization and capitalization of extensive grazing and strengthen the system of knowledge transmission and awareness of the activities for local communities of practice. I try then to propose some reflection in this sense to prepare eventually our discussion. The first reflection focuses on grazing and landscape heritage, biodiversity, knowledge, and traditional practice. Specific attention is paid to the destructuring of the sector, frictions of modernity, transformation and protection of mobility infrastructures connected to livestock. The heritage attention has to concentrate on new shepherd, landlords, walkers, lovers of the mountain, and of pastoral routes as tourist paths within the framework of the inscription to the UNESCO Intangible Heritage List, of the agricultural landscape of FAO, of the participatory inventories recommended by the Faro Convention on the value of cultural heritage as a form of empowerment and training of communities as owners of their cultural properties. The second heritage reflections is consecrated to the value of extensive grazing as an ecosystem service and as a form of relationship to the territory. Breeding is not only a way of producing precious materials for the agri-food chain and useful derivatives for craft activities such as wool, leather, and so on. In the practice of extensive grazing, a form of care and surveillance of the territories is preserved, which is constituted as a set of valuable activities for the good conservation of the environment and for the awareness of the urgencies and environmental frictions caused by contemporary changes. Increasingly, we want to recognize in pastoralism a value of care and monitoring that could also correspond to the support and compensation of the risk, including those of large predators. If the common agricultural policy has various key objectives, some of them are extremely coherent with the renewed consideration of extensive pastoralism as a value. First of all, the goal to tackling climate change. Secondly, the one oriented to the protection of national resources. And thirdly, the aim to enhancing biodiversity. The conservation of grassland is an integral part of a more general agricultural policy which declared to be oriented toward sustainability and biodiversity valorization. Pastures are a reservoir of biodiversity. Especially in Europe, we must consider that about 50% of flora and fauna species depends on grazing habitats. At the same time, extensive animal farming ensures a quite large range of ecosystem services, such as monitoring of the soil thanks to the different, monitoring of the rivers, prevention from forest and weed fire hazards, consolidation of the grassy surface of the soil, thanks to the different animals trampling. At the same time, many scholars outline the role in terms of climate change mitigation as they have a less intense carbon footprint than other intensive livestock farming activities or equally intensive agricultural exploitation of the soil. When adequately managed, grassland can have an important climate change mitigation potential as major carbon sinks. At the same time, Extensive grazing helped to mend the renewed relationship between mountains and plains, between internal fragile and inhabited areas and coastal areas through the recovery and innovation development of short supply chains, and also based on proximity, territorial routes, and lower expenditure of fuel for the transport of food produced in the mountains or in the countryside to the markets of the coast onto the near cities. Through extensive animal farming, local grazing communities provide both animal production and environmental services and contribute to enhance the soil fertility and regeneration, the reproduction and spread of insects and birds. The special blue veining of the milk provides, moreover, the particular differentiation of several derived products, for example, dairies, aged cheese, whey, and so on. The potential of the pastures and expensive pastoral system to reduce carbon emissions is increasingly explored by ecology and sustainability scientists in order to understand how extensive animal farming can contribute to the ecosystem adaptation to climate change. Moreover, extensive grazing provided during the century and even in these last decades, the maintaining and enhancement of many local animal breeds and the consequent specificity of their milk and meat derived products, ensuring a great food agrobiodiversity that can be appreciated in many Italian regions and European mountainous and hill areas through the several typical products of the regional controlled designation of origin or other similar form of geographical characterization of food products, which is somehow inverting or limiting the idea of inexorable marginality of the mountain and inner areas, especially in the European post-industrial and city-centered socioeconomic as well as symbolic space. Throughout such a kind of a recognition, extensive grazing can be considered today as a powerful element of the tentative resilience of the mountainous, rural, and remote areas to the definitive obsolescence to which a neoliberal economic system based on the intensification of the production, the common agricultural policy quota systems, a delocalized and aseptic idea of food production systems would seem to condemn them. The third reflection is that extensive grazing constitute key elements of European cultural landscapes and identity, and a powerful element of the revalorization of their rural and mountainous territories. They have historically shaped the European and Italian rural landscape, in particular, weaving a dense and varied relationship between inland areas and coastal plain areas, between depopulated and scarcely productive inner regions and progressively more industrialized urban areas. Extensive grazing has long represented on one of the cornerstones of this dense network of economic and socio-cultural relationships and exchanges. At the same time, this relationship can now be reread and rethought according to a new idea of internal and fragile areas and populous and productive regions, breaking down the extractive and hegemonic logic that in the past marked the progressive obsolescence of traditional pastoral practices, and that today, in change, once again suggests more sustainable forms of coexistence and respect. The fourth reflection focuses on the implications of grazing for biodiversity, zootechnical knowledge, interspecies relationships, animal welfare. Over the centuries, grazing has guaranteed the conservation of numerous species and genetic variants and specific breeds, and has represented an important advance in knowledge and practices that have made it possible to produce quality raw materials, shape animal species and landscape. On the other hand, traditional grazing has ensured high quality, sustainable, and healthy food, ensuring a lower environmental impact as well, and a better quality of life for animals compared to the standard of sedentary and intensive farming that reduce animals to mere merchandise. As fifth element of reflection, we have to consider the policies and rights of extensive livestock farming through the analysis of the management and governance of pastoral routes, their enhancement through the common agricultural policy quota system, the delicate issue of common lands and civic uses shared among the local population. Grazing lands are increasingly at the very center of ambivalent, if not explicitly illegal, as I said, practices. And the numerous cases collected in the mountain and grazing territories by academics and journalists attentive to the subject demonstrate this with great evidence. The last reflection that I want to suggest points to the multifunctionality of companies and tourism related to extensive livestock. In recent years, sustainable tourism works on livestock rules, the regeneration and revitalization of agri-food chains, and the implementation of grazing eco-museums have been developed as an element of a neo-endogenous development of the territories in the mountainous and internal regions. So we must to observe and to analyze such a multifunctional way to recover and re-empower local territories, because this multifunctionality is directly connected with the sustainability, economic sustainability of all pastoral sector. From the anthropological point of view, pastoral issues are addressed with specific tools such as participatory observation along the path through forms of involvement of the ethnographers in the field of research, but also with a series of activities such as shadowing, encliquage, participatory inventories, archive collection, forms of narrations, performances, and audiovisual documentation. Dealing with pastoralism, especially wandering, means dealing with comings and going, with interspecific entanglements, with the complex relationship between domestication and nature, between parks and crossing areas, thinking about the question of the coexistence of grazing animals with large predators, as I said, and the transformation of those presents, as well as in tourism in natural spaces. From the enormous sediment of herding knowledge, entire pieces of the communities can be reconstructed. The system of sociability, the social division of labor, the hierarchies of the social organization of kinship, a whole system of extremely rigid rules for passing duties, of dependencies of parental roles that structured the world of meaning and practices, which is revived through literary witnessing songs, oral culture testimonies. The human-animal relationship and cooperation in grazing also refer to the shepherd ability of, to understand the animal, to know how to deal with the herds, which is transformed into a very high degree of proximity and intimacy, an idea that is not sweetened by certainly proactive in the rethinking between anthropocentrism and animal respect. Dealing with grazing has to do with environmental, social, and economic transformation, to put this form at the center of observation, because on the one hand, they run the risk to appearing obsolete, and on the other, they are increasingly taken into account by institutions which they consider them good to think about in the achievement of sustainable global objectives, and such as, for example, environmental protection, animal welfare, product quality, systematically contrasted by regulatory frameworks. The photo with which my intervention opens, the one that we are seeing, the last image, portrays the archaeological site of Sepino Altilia, historically linked to shepherding, with which it was possible to revitalize a path of the demontication of a large family of shepherds from Rocca Mandolfi in the Molise region, which was called the mother of all the sheep, as the villagers call this place, a case that recalls all the biocultural frictions and the complexity of the heritage process on the UNESCO Intangible Heritage List. Thus, we are facing a thick and thin representation of the territory to read in depth the phenomena linked with pastoralism through historical stratification. In fact, to be completely understood, extensive animal farming requires in-depth knowledge. The spaces and pastoral paths are transformed into places, into incorporated knowledge. The gaze turned to the territory and the animals themselves, an apprenticeship of the gaze, which is itself a form of incorporation and transmission of knowledge that determines a social life of the things. For example, in the context of resource transformation practices, as cheese making or carding, weaving, leather processing, and so on. Local representation derive from this imaginary as well as heritage emotions. Thus, empathetic witnessing around pastoralism refers to the constant tension between the urban and often sweetened representation of the world and the real exercise of this profession. Finally, we cannot think of extensive grazing only as a legacy of the past. The recent forms of valuing transhumance and extensive pastoralism all over several European and non-European countries, such as Spain, France, even Italy, as I said, show a conscious regeneration of the sector under a multifunctional pattern connected to tourist flows and the market for food excellence, as well as the ecosystem services, a new metro-mountain interconnection, enabling new forms of animal farming and high-quality food production and marketing. In the same way, grazing eco-museums today works at the intersection of past and present, between the nature conservation aims and the new biotechnologies of conservation and improvement of the species and local breeds. A series of activities are developed around them, for example, farmhouses, mountain routes, artist residences, as access to virtual and electric, as well as virtual and electric fences for preservation and protection against large predators, drones for controlling and managing access to pasture and water, artificial intelligence devices to measure the animal welfare levels and their eventual stress in order to produce ethical and good to think, good to eat food, giving rise to an integrated model of territorial enhancement that at the same time supports the maintenance of extensive animal farming as a rural powerful resource and as a tourist productive activity. Thus, in this sense, pastoralism represents the opportunity of the political field to critically understand the new rhetoric and representation of rurality, as well as the new decision-making processes on local sustainable development and their critical as well as complex entanglement with the governance of lands and control upon living and sentient beings. This remodulated and narrated pastoral feed becomes the stage in which the frictions of an increasingly competitive agri-food market and the various local development policies and the radical question of political ecology are confronted and clearly emerge. Today, we think it is increasingly important to repositioning decision about such a kind of urgent issue into the communities, considering that only who knows in depth the local dimension and the local knowledge practice systems can exercise its legitimate vigilance over the multiple distortions that have determined the progressive obsolescence of the extensive farming sector. Experts, scientists, multidisciplinary scholars are asked to provide the best possible knowledge, enriching the research and interpretation capacity of the territories in a constant confrontation with local actors and stakeholders, both as heritage keepers than as guardian of the future of this crucial sector of the rural socioeconomic area. Thank you. I finished.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you to you. If there is question, and I'll be.
There are already few in the chat box. Please read.
Yes, I'm going. Sorry, I try to. Okay, I'm going to the chat box. Okay, I finally joined the meeting. Good presentation. Only word in the PowerPoint slides. I don't see any. I love the idea of School of Pastoralism. So maybe I can say something more about, can we compare the issue of payment to pastorally to avoid certain grazing areas to big companies to offset carbon? The question of credit of carbon emission. Protection of all traditional livestock breeds is close connected to the extensive agricultural system, which also need to some care and protection. Extensive gradient and transshumance system, not only in Europe, provide plenty of ecological service. Do you see a linkage between this extensive grazing or transhumance system with the organic ecological farming? This might be the future of such a system in European organic producing milk. Okay, boy, the lack of text in the slide may be deliberate in the courage to listen. Yes, a bit. I agree. I try generally to have only, I cannot say, evocative slides. I don't use slides like a resume, but I suggest with images simply sort of mental order, and I try to focus on the text. By the way, I can share a sort of index of my conference. So if you want to have some kind of reminder. So I start with some of the questions that you kindly ask. The first one is about it's about the School of Pastoralism. It's a hugely interesting issue. Italy is only later engaged country in such kind of action. The first one, the first schools of pastoralism have been realized in England, Spain, and France. One of them was the one in Maison de la Transhumance in France, and at the same time a very important one in Spain, connected with movement that were extremely engaged in enhancing and supporting. The pathway of a School of Pastoralism is strictly linked with investment of special regions or local governments in the recovery of extensive farming as a political strategy. I mean, in this sense, I try even to answer to the question that say about extensive grazing is provide plenty of ecological services. Yes, evidently, and there are some regional government that are engaged in developing strategies for helping extensive shepherds and herders in order to support them, not only because they are part of communities that are experiencing depopulation, but also in order to recovery and support activities that are territorial garrisons. I mean, in terms exactly of garrisons, as said, of protection, of care, of monitoring. So this action not only has to be recognized, but deserve to be paid off, to be recompensated somehow. And at the same time, this is connected with an increase of the reputation of the role that extensive animal farming can have and is having right now in the preservation of the soils and of the territories of some regions. So this is part of a larger movement of recognition somehow of a sector that has been in the past extremely abandoned and dismissed, and that now can receive a new consideration exactly because we are in need of forms of food production that are sustainable. So the question is, because of that, I have so much insisted in my presentation on sustainability issues, because the sustainability science is imposing somehow to come back to extensive pastoral activities. Intensive animal farming is no longer sustainable in energetic terms, in pollution terms, in consume of soil, is no longer sustainable. So the only way we have to deal with animal farming is reducing consumes on one hand, and on the other to farm in an extensive way, because these imply a less carbon emission and at the same time a more attentive care of the territories. So in this sense, evidently, there is an extreme strong linkage between, extensive grazing and transhumance system and organic and ecological farming. So extensive grazing is the ecological form of animal farming. And I consider a sort of, pivotal and pilot example of how we can manage agricultural activities that are deeply sustainable in our time. At the same time, extensive farming is strictly linked with the production of ethical food. A greater animal welfare during the life, a less strong extractivist approach, for example, to milk, a less extractivist and industrialized approach to reproduction. So even in under this aspect that is increasingly important in terms of certification and labeling, extensive grazing is extremely important because it is oriented to a more respectful way to herd and graze animals. I pass through. Tropical soil are often very old and fragile. They may limit cropping due to acidity, salinity, or shallow depth to bedrock. I agree. I never worked in tropical areas, even though I have been involved some years ago in an Ethiopian project, Italy-Ethiopian project, on group of women and cooperative movement, and I saw the extensive animal farming in the area between Ethiopia and Kenya, and evidently there is an urgent term of conservation in this area and of respect of the territories. In this case, it's evident that herders are not only doing a monitoring activity, but a pivotal activity in terms of conservation of the residual part of the pastures. So the presence of the animals and their roots is something that is ensuring the reproduction of the residual part of the grassland that are present in this area. I am about the publication. I published part of this conference in other paper that I can suggest, and I'm going to publish the entire text in a next article. But I can suggest all I already published, and that is almost all open access. So I can absolutely share with you all my previous text. Compared to African pastoralism, this is another word. Thank you for the rich, comprehensive, and powerful lecture. Yes, I can imagine in terms of unsustainability in some case of extensive pastoral activities in some African pastoral communities. I can see the difficulty, but by the way, I can say also that is extremely difficult as well in European regions and Mediterranean ones. Because of abandon and demographic decrease. So maybe here there are major social, cultural, and economic problems more than immediately evident environmental problems. But by the way, I can consider that they are very severe crisis in both the continent. I would also like to hear more about the pastoralist schools. Are student pastoralists or scholars? How are programs structured? I'm going to see. How can artificial intelligence be used to enhance pastoralism and transhumance? Well, quite advanced level and good to get the script for better understanding, I guess, through many explanation and existing data that more in-depth studies done in Europe and Asia, pastoralism and transhumance, I guess through many explanation. Okay. To want extending loss of rights and access to traditional grazing territories by pastoralists impacting on their heritage and inheritance. A lot of blame on extensive livestock production system, and it seemed, I guess, contribution of GX, even with limited number of studies in the pastoralism extensive system, yet in your paper clearly portrays that extensive system is the option for carbon sequestration, where is the lawful. It is that less understanding of pastoralism in contribution to GH and its intention to see that the system is wiped completely. Please put some light on pastoralism and GHs. Okay. So these three more questions. The first one about the school. The schools pastoralism are generally attended by herders and shepherds. Many times they are young herders and shepherd people that are both deriving from traditionally herders and shepherd families, and in other cases we are assisting to the description of people that are, as I said during the presentation, coming back or coming for the first time to learn about pastoral activities as sort of choice. Choice of life, decision about a new form of inhabiting the mountain, refuse of city extractivism and post-liberal life. So there are both this line of newcomers, new peasants, new shepherds that are somehow reactive to a style of life that they are no longer sharing and according with. And in other cases, people that come again after having had other experiences of learning and education and training, that are coming for having a very practical help to start their activities in pastoralism. So when we have projected the school, I say we because as I was in all the three direction managing board, I assisted to all the debate, and Rete Appia has been part of all the three school in Italy, and I know quite well the decision is about the one in Spain and in Spain and the ones in France. When we were projecting and planning the organization of the schools, we have both thought about practical skills and education and training and more general educational support. Both information and training and learning about how to settle and organize at the best your herding and shepherding activity, and on the other hand to think about, for example, multifunctionality in your company, in your activity, pastoral activity. So trying to give the possibility to these people to think about several ways to set and organize their own work on pastoralism. At the same time, we have provided a more general framework in which to project the action and the intention to build or to give continuity to an activity of animal farming, giving all the innovative tools and opportunities, rules, political frameworks, fundraising, and at the same time to give information about innovation, communication, marketing, and so on, in order to develop skills that are needed to be somehow competitive in their own work at the moment that they are starting. We have to do with two difficulties. On one hand, even though we decide for an extensive pastoral activity, we cannot think about a pastoral activity which is simply the traditional one. Tradition has to mix, has to deal with, has to committing with even modern issue, even actual requests for herders and shepherds. As said, how to place our products in the food market, how to disseminate the presence and the quality of your own activities, and so on. And on the other hand, we consider all the issues about innovation both in communication, ICT, platform, websites, e-marketing, and so on, and the one about artificial intelligence, learning machines, drones, etc., for empowering the activities with the tools that are needed for new exigencies and new needs, new urgencies created by several crises, such as, for example, drought, or the knowledge about where the pastures are in a better form. So, for example, the possibility to manage rational pastures throughout application, technological application, or remote sensing, or virtual fencing, fences, or the management in case of the regions that are at the margins of parks and natural areas, the management of the risk from large predators' presence. So all the monitoring tools for being protected or somehow advised about this risk, and so on. So we consider that schools can be the place where the best knowledge is given to the people that are intended, or that are expecting to start their own pastoral activity, in order to give them the best possibility for realizing an efficient company and efficient production in their own life. And finally, about this question of artificial intelligence, I answer a bit. I think finally I can close with about this idea of the pastoralism and extensive system, and the way in which these systems are dealing with carbon sequestration, and more generally on the question of sustainability, environmental sustainability. For a long time, we considered that, not we, but finally, general opinion has considered that intensive animal farming was reducing costs because was more efficient in terms of production and in terms of risk and security. At the moment, in Italy and in Europe, this is fueling right now, thanks also to some very good video documentary actions by animal activists, essentially, but not only, even environmental activists and so on. In the very last years, this idea that intensive animal farming was more efficient and more convenient is increasingly decreasing. As said, that is becoming increasingly evident, the risks that are connected. I think that COVID-19 has a great pound on this, has a great influence on this idea that the spillover and the concentration of animals can fuel the possibility of contamination. All the themes of sentinels and security and safety as something that has to deal with this very crucial phase. And I think that after this, essentially, we start to have a thought, even in the industrial, the more industrial meat, milk market, the idea that is no longer possible to continue, at least with this so evident unsustainable way to produce meat, milk, and wool, and leather, and so on. the topic of carbon sequestration was a sort of pivot of this argument, because we are fighting for carbon sequestration. We are evidently in a moment in which every activity that show a strong carbon footprint is no longer sustainable in the market, at least presently, at least officially, because in Italy we say between uh, the say and the sea, no? Between il mare, il dire e il fare, c'è di mezzo il mare, is said in Italy, is say between the say and the doing, there is the sea at the middle. Many of the things are said, and is not said that is really realized. But as said that at the moment, activities that have a great carbon sequestration are no longer accepted. So soon we have a recuperation of all the activities that are part of this green, good to think for the green transition. And extensive pastoralism is somehow good to think for extensive pastoralism. And I think that we have to profit of this phase. We have to run this wave, because we can assevere and reconfirm and consolidate a new reputation for such a kind of activities, and reclaim all the support that these activities have not in the last decades and in the last century, where intensive animal farming was the law. So I think that we must to put the accent on, for example, carbon sequestration, carbon credits. No? The companies that produce a lot of carbon footprint need to have carbon credits to use by activities that are absolutely sustainable. Well, we must do know very well the systems in order to endorse and support pastoral and animal extensive farming as the best way to deal with breeding and producing milk and meat in a sustainable, respectful, and even respectful for animal welfare way of producing.
Thank you, Professor. I guess it's
See,
quite
we
long.
arrived, yeah, it has been really long, but I try to answer to all the questions. By the way, my email is available, so if you have any question or you like and you want to continue with the dialogue, we can surely to do it.
Yeah, perfect. I guess everybody has liked and everybody has enjoyed your lecture. It's really very interesting and very great. So thank you so much that you have spared a time for us, and you have benefited a diverse audience from different continents. So I think it is marvelous, and we have recorded your lecture, and those who could not attend because the incorrect link was served in
Yeah.
the yes.
Yeah,
So
I saw that was incorrect link,
yes,
so
yes, it
hope
was it.
we can recover.
It happened because of the human error anyway. So we will apologize from everyone in the groups, and then we will also circulate the link of the uploaded video. Maybe
Perfect.
tomorrow we will circulate it, and your complete lecture will be available for listening and also watching. So thank you once again for your time. So
You
last,
too.
yeah, thank you.
Real pleasure and an honor.
Uh,
So
yes, thank you, madam. Yes, thank you. Dear friends, I like to take another 2 minutes to share with you. There was one couple of our participants asked to explain the how to access the lessons and the quiz particularly. Okay, so just I will take 2 minutes, not much. Let me share the screen. So um, if you watch this, my if you see my screen here, so this is the platform where we are organizing this course. You just log in here. So if you already have the account, so you will log in here from here. Okay, right? So otherwise you will see the register or login, sign in buttons here. You can enter into this platform, and once you enter into this platform after login, you can on pilot basis we have these 5 courses. So the first one which we have launched and we are doing it is the this one, pastures, pastoralism and rangeland governance. So please click this and you will be here, landing here. And when you are here, if you are new login, then you have to click on this button here. You will see enroll, not free. You will see enroll button here. So you click and then you will be automatically enrolled in this. So once you are enrolled, then you have to click this content button here. So content, now you have the introduction part, you have the module 1, you have the module 2. Module 3 will be activated on this coming weekend. So after these are the only 3 modules for 3 weeks. There is also one special module here that is a kind of case study field work. So when you go here, then you click the introduction, and if you click the introduction, you will land to on this page. So in this page, you have all table of contents, and then you have a list of all the Zoom sessions here. So you can straight away, those which are completed have the recorded video here and the Zoom chat text and PPT file. So everything is here. So this is just the introduction page, but there is a lot inside. When you click the module 1, you will have the introduction, unit 1.1 to 1.6, and there are the quiz. So quiz is mandatory for everyone to pass. So once you click the quiz, so you can click this start quiz, or quiz are also here. um, Now, when you click the introduction, or suppose unit 1.1, so if you click this full content, so here you have the quiz on the right side here. Here, all quiz are listed here. So similarly, this time this is the second week, so we are in the module 2. So in the module 2, we have again 2.1 to 2.6 units, and there is a lot of material inside. Many videos, photos, etc. So many things, case studies. So you will enjoy this. So this that's it. And doing a quiz is important, as I said, is mandatory, and passing it is also mandatory. So those who failed actually, so those entries we have already removed, and you can reattempt. So that is already open for everybody. Thank you very much. If any specific question, I can give 1 minute. Otherwise, um, we will just close this session. Okay? No question? No clarification? Or tomorrow we have the intervention of one Dr. Hussain from Kenya. He is very well connected activist in the pastoralism. He has been organizing lot many activities surrounding pastoralism in African continent, not only in Kenya but regionally. Um, so. Uh, so please join tomorrow, and day after tomorrow is very interesting session of one our friend from Spain. Okay, so she is a shepherdess herself, so she will explain how she has been doing it. So tomorrow and day after tomorrow we have the two practitioners who will have their interventions here on this platform, and please join. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.